what was embedded in the Constitution. Now, what they did is they developed this device that we're going to take this to conventions. When 9 state conventions vote to ratify this Constitution, it becomes a law of the land. Now, I've debated scholars and brought them home on the subject that, hey, don't tell me that the technology didn't permit them to ratify the Constitution as a nation. You could ride a horse from southern Georgia to Maine in 30 days. So that's all it would take to ratify, to present it to the people. But no, what they wanted to do was to circumvent the people. That's why they were at the conventions. And if you look at who got elected at these conventions, it was the opposition, the proponents and opponents, but they were the elites. Now, why were the elites so deeply involved? Because they had the biggest stake in society at the time. If the nation, which was going to hell in a handbasket, is going to go, who gets hurt the most? The people who have the most. So who gets most concerned about trying to find a solution to that? It's the elites. And so they took it to conventions because they knew what happened in Massachusetts. And I wonder if you know. In 1776, at the conclusion of the convention, after declaring independence, what they said as they went home, look, go back to your various states and organize yourself into new governments, because we don't have the British government to rule us anymore. They just declared independence. So in Massachusetts, they wrote a constitution in 1778. And lo and behold, all states had slaves, including Massachusetts. And they wrote a constitution, and it included slavery. People of Massachusetts voted it down. And in some cases, it was very vitriolic. Some real anger was expressed. Well, John Adams then wrote a constitution that was presented to the people of Massachusetts in 1780. And it had nothing to do with slavery. In fact, the language is so harsh on slavery that it set it up for legislating against slavery. And guess what? It passed. Had the best chance that we ever had to end slavery was right at the end of the Revolutionary War, because slaves, freed slaves, and some not so free escapees, fought in the Revolutionary War. It had changed the whole attitude that George Washington had. And so the cotton gin had not been invented as yet. It's the cotton gin that raised the value of slaves and brought the slavery headlong into the Deep South. And so as a result of that, now we missed this opportunity to do away with slavery, and that's where Pinckney really carried the day, and he turned around and inserted slavery into the Constitution, which has been the scourge of this country since then. Even after the Civil War, you had 90 years of 90 years of Jim Crowism. And all that was in violation of the Constitution, all those southern states. But politics was such that the Democrats controlled the South, and they wouldn't raise the issue. That's the Democratic Party. And of course, you know what happened with the advent of Lincoln and all that. So I'll go right cut to the chase. One of the worst things that they did was to turn around and take away your sovereign power. What do I mean? George Washington, James Madison, James Wilson, the best statement of all, and others, essentially our forebears, all said, and they got repeated quotes, they said that you, as citizens, should be able to change your government in order to meet your needs for your happiness in the future. They all said this. Well, what happened? We've never been able to do that. Well, these wonderful gentlemen didn't give us the tools to do it with. That would have been in Article 7, but they didn't do that. But they did, as a result of the conventions and the way slavery was locked in, they denied you any opportunity to become sovereign. Because you see, sovereign implies that you're participating in power. That's what it implies. but you don't participate in power. What you do on election day is for a few seconds, when you throw that switch, you're all powerful. You throw it, you walk out of there, and you can't do a damn thing for 2, 4, 6 years. And people like myself who run for office get money from special interests to manipulate you as a constituency to vote for me. Then after I get elected, I look at you. Who do you think I think is the smarter? Me or you? You know that answer. And so I go off and do my thing. That's essentially the way. Let me tell you how politicians think. Okay? Whether it's a governor, president, the city council. Here, first thing that comes to mind, this is not pejorative. This is just human nature. This is the basic structure of representative government. First thing that comes to mind, I'm elected. How is this decision that I'm about to make publicly going to affect me? Now, you'd say the same thing if something were challenging you in your place of employment. How does this affect me? Well, that's the first thing. I got kids in school. I got my career launched. The next thing, I want to get reelected, or I want to get appointed to something. The next thing that comes to my mind is, how does this affect the person who put the money up to get me here and to keep me here? That's the second level. The third is, how does this affect the party? Because when my party's in power, I got power. Now, we're at the fourth level, and I haven't even addressed the public interest. Now, I haven't addressed the fact of my ideology. I haven't addressed the fact whether I'm corrupt or not. So do you see, structurally, it is impossible for representative government to be able to one, face up to the public demands first and foremost. Because that's how the individuals act. Now, the second feature of that is that the parties control the system. And when you look very closely, you see that you can't become anybody in the Congress unless you're either a Democrat or Republican. You got Bernie Sanders, who I think is a treasure. You know, he's a minority. He's just out there talking, making sense, but he's got no clout because he doesn't belong to one of the parties. And they don't trust him. They didn't trust me. I was a maverick. My biggest opposition was within the Democratic Party. And so, the parties, you can't get to the Supreme Court or a federal bench or even a prosecutor unless you've got some party credentials. You can't become president unless you're either a Democrat or Republican. And what do we know about the parties? They're so corrupt that our forebears called them factions and thought they were corrupt. Totally. And that's the first thing that happened in Washington's first administration between Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson. Is there anybody that could get me some water somewhere?
There's some right here.
Oh, there it is. Here. So now the biggest problem we have is the fact that not only did we get slavery foisted on us to engender almost a generic racism in us as human beings. Not only did they do that, but I think more importantly, they took away your power to legislate. And you gave that power to representatives. And so that's where the difference is. And so the structure of representative government, if you look very closely, it is designed to maintain you in civic adolescence. Now what's civic adolescence? Oh, I want this road, or I want this, but I don't want to pay any taxes, please. I want that, but I don't want to pay any taxes. Now, if that's not adolescent behavior, and you all have experienced this with your own children, that's what we have as a structure. What we need to do is to breach that to bring you to adult civic behavior. Now, how do we do that? Not rocket science. You do it in your lives, with your children. What you do is you give your children a little bit of responsibility here, there, and then all of a sudden you hope they become adults and that they don't have to come back home. But they do, and you take them with loving arms when they do come back home. So that's the process of how we become mature. Now, how can we become mature as citizens? That's how we do it in our personal life. Same thing. We've got to have you take responsibility for your governance. and not blame George, not blame Bill, you name it, not blame Barack, and I got a lot to blame on him, and I'll cover that in a moment. But